In last week's lesson, we learned that the vicious argument cycle can be broken, and that there is clear instruction in the Bible on who leads the way in breaking that cycle. And Ephesians chapter 5 makes it very clear that it's the husband. And the way he does that is by memorizing the 9 fruits of the Spirit and checking himself on a daily basis to see if he's modeling those Christ-like behaviors in front of his wife and children. And in time, they will begin to respect and trust his leadership because he is modeling those behaviors. I hope you husbands were able to memorize the 9 fruits of the Spirit, and I hope that you worked on checking yourself and making sure that you're modeling those Christ-like behaviors in front of your wife and in front of your children. Well, this week we're going to shift to the wife and take a look at the wife's role as helper. Leadership in any area of life can be either supported or undermined by its followers. It's important to understand that when leadership established by God is undermined, serious problems will arise. So again, let's say that all of you husbands did exactly like you were supposed to. You memorized the 9 fruits of the Spirit, you checked yourself on a daily basis, and you were modeling those Christ-like characteristics day in and day out. But you're still not getting the response from your wife or from your children. It does take the will of the followers to follow the leader. And if that doesn't happen, then problems will arise. So, for example, when a wife becomes the predominant leader in a home, she not only inflicts undue trouble, she removes herself from the protection of her husband. This is fairly common. We will have a couple come into our office and the wife will say he will not take his rightful role of a leader of our home as the spiritual head. So, I'm doing it. And then she'll tell us how she's the one that calls the kids together for prayer or for Bible study, or she's the one that begins to cast vision for their home and say, this is the direction I believe God would have us to go. Because her husband won't do it. It's called usurping authority. And usurp just means that you will take back or go around someone's authority because they're not doing it, or because they're not doing it the way that you think that they should be doing it. But when a wife does that, she removes herself from the protection and the leadership of her husband. If a wife feels that her husband is not assuming leadership in any area of their marriage, she should not assume the role herself, but do everything possible to help her husband to become stronger in that area. And 3 steps are, I'm going to give you 3, and I'd encourage you to write these down. The first is, resist the temptation to take over. Wives, when you feel it coming on, if he doesn't do this, I'm just going to jump up and assume the role. Just resist the temptation to do that. Just don't succumb to it. Number 2, talk to your husband and tell him your desire for him to take the lead, and that you will follow his leadership when he does. Now, this would be a great opportunity for you to use the live technique that we learned several weeks ago. Say, I've got something I want to talk to you about, and let's use the live technique to talk it out. And then, husband, you listen to her feelings and everything that she has to say, and you interpret back what you heard her say in so many words, and then you validate her feelings, and then you begin to express your feelings, and then wives, you listen to what your husband has to say about it. Use that technique and get to the bottom of it so that you will come out with a conclusion that you both are happy with. The third step, if nothing works up to this point, is, if necessary, consult a Christian marriage counselor to help you establish proper leadership roles in your home. Now again, I hope that it doesn't take going to a counselor to do this, But listen, if you can't resolve this one between the two of you, by all means, go and see a Christian counselor and trust God to use their coaching skills to coach you through this process and help you come up with a conclusion that you're both happy with. Go with the goal in mind of walking away with a win-win situation, one that you both are completely happy with. The role of wife was established by God to be a helper to her husband. Listen to Genesis 2:18. And the Lord God said, "It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him." So it's important to know that helper does not mean servant. It means that a wife will complete her husband. Now remember our very first lesson. We said that God made man, and He said that it's not good that man should be alone. So He took from man a rib and the materials to make this counterpart, this woman, this helper. So this helper is not a slave to the man. No, she completes the man. Again, remember the part that says, "For this reason a man shall leave his mother and father and cleave to his wife, and the two shall be made one flesh." That goes for women too. But again, why do they do that? For this reason? The reason why is so that they will be one again. The two will complete each other and make one flesh. So again, she will complete her husband, providing, first of all, the counterpart of affection and sexual intimacy. A woman completes, she's the helpmeet to her husband. She's the counterpart of affection and sexual intimacy. Secondly, she completes her husband by providing a natural ability to nourish babies. That's something that comes very natural to women, and that's something that does not come so natural to men. As a matter of fact, in some ways, the man's not even equipped to nourish babies. The next is a feminine perspective on the issues. Now, this one's a big point of contention between a lot of husbands and wives. Because my wife has a different perspective, I'm frustrated. Well, she's supposed to have a different perspective. And the longer you're married, I hope, the more you realize and learn to listen to your wife's perspective. For years, my wife, who has great spiritual discernment, it took me at least 15 years to realize that she has great spiritual discernment. She would tell me, "I don't feel like you should get into business with that guy." And I would say, "What? He's a Christian guy. He's a good man. He's got a great track." And she would say, "Paul, I don't know what it is. My skin crawls when he walks in the room. I don't feel good about him." And I would get so mad because maybe he had the investment money to make my business work or something. And I'd get all excited. I finally found an investor, and my wife would say, "Oh, he's not the guy." I would get so furious. Well, guess what? She was right most of the time. I mean, probably in the 90 percentile. And it was a tough decision for me, but I can remember when I decided, you know what? I'm going to begin to listen to her perspective and rely on it. Because God has given her to me to complete me. And she sees from my blind spot. She just sees things in a perspective that I don't. So again, a feminine perspective on the issues. And lastly, she provides encouragement and agreement. Now, I know that doesn't come so quick when there's contention in the marriage, but when things are working properly, when that cycle is spinning the right way, and instead of offensive words that strike fears that cause reactions and counterattacks that cause more in the cycle to spin out of control, it begins to go the other way, then those words are of affirmation and agreement. Yes, I'm feeling good about this. So then my wife completes me by agreeing with me and encouraging me. Yeah, I feel good about this. Let's do this. So encouragement and agreement is the final one. Together, a husband and wife complete each other and become one flesh, the image of God. Because of this God-given role, husbands are wired for leadership, and any actions contrary to this premise will frustrate the husband. So, ladies, I'm going to give you 3 things that husbands hate. And they're going to be very anxious for you to write these 3 down. So I would encourage you to get your couples manual and write these down. The first one is feeling or being pushed. Now, I can't make absolute statements that every man hates this, but it's very common. Most husbands don't like the feeling like they're being pushed. They just don't like it. Number 2 is for his wife to be burdened or tense. And you say, well, Paul, where'd you get that one? I mean, I would think he would not like for me to make him feel burdened or tense. But you just said he doesn't like it when I feel burdened or tense. Well, that's true. And the reason why a husband hates for his wife to be burdened or tense is because he connects the dots pretty quickly and realizes she's burdened or tensed or fearful or uncomfortable with something because he has not taken his proper role in leadership. Maybe it's financially frustrated. The husband realized, wow, she's all upset about this because I have not taken my proper role in leading our family in the area of providing and budgeting and making sure that everything is taken care of. Now, I know that different couples handle finances differently, but I think you get the point that I'm trying to make. He connects the dots and realizes it's because of a deficiency on his part that his wife is burdened or tense. And the third one is a wife who resists him in disciplining children. A wife who resists him in disciplining children. This is huge. It works the other way too for wives, I know. But this is a biggie. The husband feels like, I'm the leader of my home. I need to set order. I need to set standards for discipline. And when I go to discipline one of the kids and you jump in and resist that discipline, especially in front of the kids, it minimizes my authority in their eyes and in their minds. And husbands hate that. Those are 3 things that husbands hate. Additionally, a wife actually has the ability to emasculate her husband. If you're not familiar with that term, emasculate, it just means to take away his masculinity. It takes it away from him and makes him feel like less of a man. A wife has the ability to do that, and the irony of it is that there are few other people on the planet that can do that to a man, but his wife can do it. And really, if you think about it, it's not a mystery as to why that's the case. When you know that she is supposed to complete me, and now she's not only not completing me, she's uncompleting me. Instead of making me feel more than, she's making me feel less than. And she's the only person on this planet that has the ability to do it to that degree. So she has the ability to emasculate her husband. The next are 7 ways a wife destroys her husband's manliness. And again, wives, be sure and write these down. Actually, husbands should write these down too to understand them. Number 1, the first way is by expecting him to know what you need without telling him. Now, again, I've admitted that sarcasm was my problem for many years, so I would sarcastically say to Evie, I forgot to tell you, but my ESP is broke today. I don't know what you're wanting me to do. I don't read minds, so would you please tell me? Well, it was true that it was wrong for her to expect me to be able to read her mind, but it was wrong for me too to handle it with sarcasm. But number 1, again, is expecting him to know what you need without telling him. Just tell him. Again, we've given you tons of good techniques for good communication. Just sit down and tell him what you need. Number 2, this is the second way a wife destroys her husband's manliness. Number 2 is being financially independent. Now, I know that's a very sore spot with a lot of people, We're finding that a lot of couples have separate checking accounts. Well, the husband's responsible for the mortgage and the car payments and this and that, and then the wife is responsible for the groceries and the kids, clothes and things like that. It's just not healthy. It's just not healthy. Especially when a wife goes to the extent of becoming financially independent. In other words, saying, I really don't need you to provide for me. I can take care of myself. It emasculates her husband. Number 3 is being more loyal to outside leadership than her husband. Now, this one happens in very subtle ways. I don't think there's any wife that says, I'm going to consciously become more loyal to someone outside of our marriage than I am my husband. Wives don't do that on purpose, but it can sure happen. Here's an example. How about a case where the wife goes to church and the husband doesn't? So every Sunday she comes home, she says, well, the pastor says you should be doing this. And the pastor says we should be doing that. And the pastor says that this is what we should do with our money. And the pastor says, at some point, the husband's just had enough. Not only is he frustrated at this guy called the pastor and would probably like to punch the guy in the face because he's ruining his life, it emasculates the husband himself. You're putting more stock in what that guy says that you see in one service a week than you do with me, who you see 7 days a week. When you put more trust or become more loyal to a leader outside of your home. Now, pastor is one example. I'm sure you could think of many others. It could be the wife's father. Yeah, daddy feels like we should do this. And daddy says this, and daddy says that. Well, now I'm a daddy of a married daughter, and I would be a hypocrite to say that I don't want to have some influence in my daughter's life, even though she's married and has a husband. I'm very careful about that. But if you're not careful, wives, your loyalty to daddy can override and be a stronger influence in your life than your loyalty to your husband. And that actually takes away his masculinity. So being more loyal to outside leadership than your husband. Number 4 is resisting his decisions in your spirit. When he finally does say, all right, this is what we're going to do. We're heading in this direction. Everybody follow me. And he can tell that you're not wanting to go there. He just feels it in your spirit. You're resisting him. Maybe you don't come right out and say, I think you're wrong for going in that direction. You might just say some subtle thing that's got a subliminal message like, well, you better check on that first. Or, last time we did that, we got in trouble. Or some underlying message that basically shows him that you're resisting his leadership. It's one of the ways of taking away his manliness. Number 5 is reviewing his past failures. Listen, wives, this is a biggie for us husbands. We feel like we're growing and getting better and stronger. And I know I used to be rotten, but even as of last week, I've really memorized the 9 fruits of the Spirit, and I'm trying really hard here to be the leader of this house. And all of a sudden, you throw me a left jab and remind me of something rotten I did 2 months ago? It just makes a guy feel like he's not making progress. And men are all about progress and leadership. And when you undermine it in that way, it emasculates him. Number 6 is resisting his physical affection. Now, this is a complicated one, and we're going to get to physical affection in a few weeks. Trust me, guys, we're going to get there. But it is a fact that when a woman resists her husband's physical affection, it can make him feel like less of a man. Now, again, I just feel like I owe another disclaimer here. I've heard all of the stories. Well, he's only affectionate with me when he wants it to lead to something, and I want non-sexual affection. I've heard all of that. And again, we'll get to that in a few weeks. But it still stands to be a truth that men feel emasculated when their wives resist their physical affection. And number 7 is taking matters into your own hands. I mentioned this before, to resist the temptation to take the role of leader in your home. This emasculates a man when he sees his wife saying, okay, you're not going to deal with it? I'll take care of it. Give it to me. I'll take care of this. I'm going to take matters into my own hand. And that is a masculine characteristic in many cases. And it will just make your husband feel like less of a man. So we've covered 3 things that husbands hate and 7 ways that a wife can destroy her husband's manliness. The husband's role of leader is a role of great responsibility. The responsibility is huge. The authority is huge, but you remember our lesson about responsibility or authority, and with every level of authority comes a new level of responsibility. There is a huge responsibility that the husband assumes when he becomes head of his wife and leader of his home. It does not make him better than his wife or deserving of preferential treatment. It simply means that he has the responsibility to lead and love his wife and children just as Christ leads and loves his church. And that's the key point. Just as Christ leads and loves his church. When the husband assumes his God-given role as head of his wife and leader of his home, the wife will be in a very safe and secure place, one that meets the desires of her heart. Now, if you really understand how this works, the man's role as the head of his wife and leader of his home, and the wife's role as the helper, the completer to her husband, these two work so well together that neither one is left undone or wanting. The two work together perfectly, just as God created us to work together. So, last week we talked about the vicious argument cycle that spins out of control in the wrong direction. But I think you can see, as the husband begins to lead the way and the wife follows his lead and respects him, and the husband leads the way and the wife encourages him, and the two begin to work together to complete each other, this whole process begins to spin the other way in the direction that cycle was supposed to work in the first place. And the end result is a healthy, productive relationship that produces a healthy, productive